Brackets are here, and it's the month of March, and let the madness officially commence. I am freaking fired up right now, and I know there's a couple fan bases that are. TJ on assignment, my co-pilot as always, Vegas Mack. What is up, my brother? It's an exciting time.
It is so cool. I can't wait. Such a fun time of the year. Yeah, man, just so much just to dig into. Let's go. Let's get this started.
Yeah, a lot of chatter, as there usually is on bracket reveal day, and who got in and who didn't, who got screwed. We have a new tournament this year, the College Basketball Crown. The NIT is still trying to limp its way along. I've always been a fan of the NIT. Oh. The College Basketball Crown is interesting, Mac. I wanted to ask you that right off the top, because we haven't really talked about this in our pre-show meetings and just in general in our group text. Like, do you have any interest in the College Basketball Crown? They're really trying to throw something out there to help some of these teams that get screwed, if you will, that we're going to talk about. Do you have any interest in watching it?
Yeah, I mean, I like what, because here's the deal. Well, you know, let me back up. I used to always think the NIT was that stepping stone. You know, when you have a program, you're trying to build a program, you get to the NIT, you have some success in the NIT, and that's kind of your stepping stone. But, you know, the way college sports are set up now, there's no real stepping stones. It's kind of, you know, you're into the fire and you're out and then you're back in. And so it's not so much a stepping stone. It can be, you know, at this point, you know, these teams are already, you know, in the portal trying to get guys. So maybe it's a way for them to show off their program. But I mean, as a coach, you got to just say, if we're not in the NCAA tournament, this is a way for my team to get better. And that's how I look at it. So there's always some fun teams to watch for in those tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, my concern with it is this, and we've seen this. We've seen teams in the past couple of years decline the invite to the NIT. Like, we're not playing, you know, maybe they're going through a coaching change, whatever the case may be. So I'm interested to see, because Fox is behind that, and it seems like there's some money behind it, Vegas and all that. Which teams say, no, we're done, we're not playing, you know, we are going to play. I think that's an interesting dynamic here too. You know, NIL and everything changes all that, but I'm interested to see how that goes. But obviously the cherry on top of the sundae is March Madness. A lot of us, this is, you know, we're 4 or 5 days away. I can't do math right now. Dude, I'm jacked right now. Like, this is my favorite time of year. And it's like the 4 or 5 days before Christmas here. And I don't really have a ton of problems here. Obviously, the general thought is going to be who's not there and who's got a chance to be there and all that. Feel free to comment if you're watching live. We appreciate you. You follow us on all of our social channels at Mike Aranda Show. And, you know, who got screwed? Let us know. Let us know who you think's going to win it. And feel free to comment in there, Mac. First thing that jumps out to you now that we've seen the full field, including the games in Dayton, which are always fun to watch. The first thing that jumps out to you.
I think it's fair. I mean, I really do. I mean, a lot of times, you know, always feel there's 4 or 5 teams that should have got in. I think this is really, really fair. There's some really fun matchups. I think for the first time, I think in a couple of years, each region's a little different. We'll get into that, obviously, but I just think there's a real big difference between each of the brackets. It's kind of like their own little party.
Yeah, and you know, interesting to see how they fielded the entire field. Easy for you to say, but doesn't sound right. Obviously, some of the lines are out now, so we'll get into that as we go region by region. But, you know, as we go every single year, Mac, it's who's in and who's out. And I'm gonna trigger some people in the ACC, which only got 4 teams in from a football standpoint, and playing the role I think of Florida State, if you will, is West Virginia. Now, when I'm saying that, West Virginia, I think the Tucker DeVries situation and his injury has a lot to do with why they're not there. And I like what was done with Xavier, Texas, North Carolina, some of the teams that were on the fringe. It was like, hey, you know what? We think you're a tournament team. We're pretty sure you're a tournament team, but you're going to have to prove it to us before you get there. That's the thing that steps out to me. And I think Indiana might have a little bit of a case here. No losses outside of quad one. And everybody's thing with North Carolina is the record in quad one games, and they lost the quad three game to Stanford. So I don't have a problem with it either. When it comes down to North Carolina, I think that's going to be a sore spot. I've already seen a little bit of the chatter. Well, their AD is part of the selection committee. And yes, he wasn't in the room, but he still influenced the committee. We're reaching here, people. You're being Florida State fans when Jordan Travis got hurt and why they didn't get in a couple of years ago. That's what screams to me, hey, here's where we're at, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I always look at, some of those other teams, like a Boise State, which had a really nice little run at the end. I think for me, if there's one team, I think Indiana, I think was probably more deserving than North Carolina, just on merit alone. But, you don't know, here's the thing. You don't know what's happening at Indiana as well. You don't know how much that plays into it as well. They're looking for a coach. All those little things make a difference. Let's be honest. I mean, sometimes it comes down to name. You hate to say it. Sometimes it just does. And North Carolina, a little bit better name right now than Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not by much.
Yeah. And when you look at it, happy birthday shout out, by the way, to Reeve. Apparently it's Reeve's birthday today and he cannot stop anything. So happy birthday to Reeve there. But when we look at this, this is a popular topic too. And it's kind of interesting. Do conference tournaments actually matter? And I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm on the fence. I think conference tournaments are great. Obviously, it's a great way for all of us to kind of get ready and prep for March Madness. I think there's some excitement every year, and we saw that again this year. Great Big Ten final today. You saw Wisconsin kind of run out of gas. But I think the conference tournaments matter to the teams that are kind of on the fence, the middle tier teams. And I think Kelvin Sampson, after Houston won the Big 12 title last night, said it perfectly. Like, listen, we play 20 games in our conference. It's a 3 or 4 day showcase of our conference, but the conference champion is the team that won in the regular season. And I really do kind of believe that. And here's the stat to back it up. Out of the last 5 national champions, 3 of them did not win their conference tournaments. They were knocked out prior to winning, some of them in the championship game and whatever else. This year, 14 of the 31 conference tournaments, the top seed did not win it. So what's your take on conference tournaments and their impact?
I love the conference tournament, but I'm a little biased because I just think every year the Big East tournament is one of the best tournaments going. So, I mean, I watched the Big East, my whole life. It's just there's something magic about that tournament. There's something fun about a team getting on a run, a 6 or a 7 seed in that tournament and kind of maybe getting a chance. But yeah, I mean, I get it. In the big conferences, probably not so much. But a Mount St. Mary's or an SIU Evansville. I mean, do those conference tournaments mean something? Yeah, they do, because some of these teams get a chance to do something that we've all been in the backyard shooting a basket, getting our team into the Final Four, winning a national championship, and it's the dream. It's what it is. It's like some of these schools. I mean, they know I'm a 16 seed, and I got to go up against a Houston and whatnot. And yeah, we probably don't really have the greatest chance, but it doesn't matter. We're in. You live with that the rest of your life. I was in the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big thing. So do I love the conference tournaments? I do. For the bigger conferences, I get it. It's probably not as important, but they're fun to watch. Like I said, I love, every tournament has that one team that kind of sort of makes a run and it can almost get there. That's a fun thing. That's what makes it exciting.
Yeah, and we saw it last year with North Carolina State. I mean, they went on the run and their run kept going, and they were the darlings and the story in there. So I do like the conference tournaments for those teams like the NC State. Hey, we got to win 5 games in 5 freaking days, and like look, Wisconsin's a good example, and Wisconsin's one of those teams that I think has really fallen under the radar. John Tonje, that should have been the player of the year in the Big East. We can get to that when we get into Wisconsin's placement in this whole format here. But yeah, I definitely agree with it. And there's no like, I think the Big East tournament is the best tournament for me. It's you can't match the setting. You can't match the intensity. Those final 4 teams that we had going in with the final 4 of the Big East tournament, it's what makes, and then the Garden. It's just the Garden and the intros and you can go the 9s there. So let's get started here, Mac, and let's go.
I was going to ask you a question. Did anybody get hurt or helped really from the conference tournaments?
SEC, no, because the SEC was loaded. I think Texas's play probably got them into their position. So I think Texas was a benefactor of it. We saw a lot. We knew St. John's was probably going to win the Big East tournament, and they did. We knew Houston was probably going to win the Big East tournament. I think Michigan and Arizona are 2 teams that haven't been afraid to share my thoughts on. I think both of them are kind of overrated this year. I think when it comes down to Arizona, they're a one-man band. And with Michigan, and you got to give them credit with Dusty May, they've won a lot of close games, and that's a thing that could propel you and prepares you for the tournament. But I don't think this year, compared to past years, there was as many huge benefactors as far as the major teams in the tournament. But I do think typically, and it goes to your point, there's teams that have played their way into the tournament in power positions and moved their way up because of how I think this year's conference tournaments, we didn't really get that. I think we saw a lot of the expected teams. The SEC, it could, throw spaghetti on the wall, whatever stuck. You had Auburn, you had Bama, Tennessee, and obviously Florida, who ended up winning it. But I think that is the advantage of it for sure. And let's dive into it. Let's go to the East Regional first. They're paired with the Midwest, so we're on the right side of your bracket here. And then the number 1 seed in the East, the 2nd overall seed, the Duke Blue Devils, who showed me a lot in the ACC tournament. They dealt with some injuries. Obviously, the biggest one was Cooper Flagg. I thought maybe we would see a tired team in the ACC championship game, and that was not the case for Duke. Obviously, and I don't want to bring this up, but because you feel for the kid, but you have to. Right as we got off the air Friday night previewing the Boston Red Sox, the Carolina Duke game was coming to an end. Lane violation probably cost Carolina. Some people thought it was going to cost Carolina a spot in the tournament, but I was really impressed with Duke. And, to say Duke has depth is ridiculous because it's Duke. They recruit depth. They're one of the blue bloods in the country, but they get the 2nd overall seed, the East Regional Final in Newark. What's the first thing, Mister leading us off? Lead us off on the East region.
All right. Easiest road. This is the easiest road. This bracket, easiest road for the top seed for Duke.
Okay. And you know what? I don't think that's unfair. The one thing that I noticed when I looked at the East Regional is, man, do we have some teams that can score some friggin' points in the East Regional. There are teams that can fill it up. Obviously, the 2 seed in the region, Alabama, they're one of the better scoring teams in the country. 18 times this season, they went over 90 points. They're going to open with Robert Morris in the first round. And here's the thing with Alabama, and you saw it when they played Florida, Grant Nelson and his status. And as they go into the, obviously you would assume they're going to beat Robert Morris. But what happens with Alabama as they move forward? Because they're potentially looking at a Vanderbilt team in the 2nd round that is kind of an interesting team. more than likely, they're probably looking at a St. Mary's team that's one of the best defensive teams in the country. But that's the thing that jumps out to me in the East region is the amount of teams that can really fill it up. And probably the most interesting game, and I'm going to let you run with this because I'm pretty sure, without knowing what you're going to say, the game that stands out the most in the East region to you is what?
BYU VCU.
Exactly.
I tell you, I love this matchup. So I'm a little scared for BYU actually in this matchup because I think I love the way BYU's played the last half of the year. I honestly think that they have a Final Four look to them. They're that kind of a team. But that's a tough. If there's a tough part to this bracket, that's right there because VCU and then they could be looking straight at Wisconsin. That's a tough 2-game stretch for the Cougars.
Yeah, and the styles clash, if you will, when it comes to the VCU BYU game is you've got BYU that can fill it up, and you've got VCU that wants to defend the hell out of you, led by Max Shulga, their senior guard, who is fantastic player to watch. And VCU is always a team when we get to tournament time that does make noise. It doesn't matter who's been the coach at VCU. They roll through the coaches. I'm interested to see right above them when you look at your bracket in the East Regional. We've got the 5-12, which obviously the 5-12 is a popular thing, and it has been for a long time. We're going to give you a stat on the 5-12s and 6-11s later. But you got Oregon and Liberty, which is a football rematch from a couple of years ago. Dana Altman is one of the best tournament coaches out there, and he is a pain in the ass to match up with. He does so many things as far as the defensive looks for Oregon. So you've got the Oregon Liberty matchup, and then a team that I mentioned just a few minutes ago, Arizona. Arizona's a one-man band to me. And when Caleb Love is on, like he was against Texas Tech the other night, Arizona's a different team. But it's if Caleb Love is on is the question. They get a very, very tough, dangerous team with Akron and John Gross. That's a tough team, and that's a tough matchup. I like that side of the bracket a little bit more. I don't think it's as easy of a road for Duke as maybe you do. But that 5-12, 4-13 kind of pocket in there is what jumps out to me. When you look at the top side, it's questionable, but that Sweet 16 potential matchup, I think, could be a little dangerous for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I go back to that Arizona-Akron game. Akron likes to shoot the ball. I mean, they shoot the ball well for threes, and that'll be interesting to see how Arizona can defend that. Like I said, for me, I worry about the injuries with Duke. That's the thing. I mean, you can cover that up for a little bit, but you're going to get 4 or 5 days off and whatnot. But it's still, we don't know how those injuries are going to be. I think they'll be fine in the first couple rounds. But Duke Arizona would be kind of a fun little matchup. I don't think Duke would be too much worried on that. That's what I said. There's nobody in that half of the bracket that I really see giving Duke that much of a run.
No, and you look at the 8-9 right below Duke there, Mississippi State and Baylor, and you've got I've talked a couple of times about Mississippi State. They're a really hard team. Easy for you to say. They're a really hard team to gauge because some days Mississippi State looks like there is as one of the better teams in the SEC. Obviously, Josh Hubbard is the starter and the fire starter for Mississippi State. But then Baylor, it's hard. What do you make of Baylor? VJ Edgecombe and Norshad Omier, who was at Miami. That's kind of interesting little pocket there too. But I think Oregon, if anybody's going to beat Duke at the top, Oregon's the team that probably has the best chance to. I know people with how Arizona has played as of late are thinking that Tommy Lloyd's group is kind of getting into their rhythm, but you know this better than anybody. We never really know what we're going to get, and it doesn't seem to matter when Arizona gets to March Madness. Sometimes you look at a team like Akron and you think they're going to get bounced right away. Other times you go, Duke and Arizona, that's the matchup I want. I don't know which Arizona team we're going to get because to me, again, they're a one-man band.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean I mean that's an on paper matchup that we kind of would like to see, Duke and Arizona. But I just think Duke has got so many more weapons, and they're so much more physical than Arizona is as well. I don't think that would be a good matchup for them at all. I like the other one. I was just going to say I like the 7-10, the St. Mary's and Vandy. Vandy's a sneaky good team, and I mean, and I know we've talked a lot about St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a team. Again, a lot of people, especially on the East Coast, don't get to see them play very much. But this is a really a big team, well-rounded team. They could do some damage. I just don't like that matchup against Alabama. That would be my only concern with them in that second round.
Yeah, and the Alabama-St. Mary's possible matchup would be an interesting styles clash there because St. Mary's is one of the top 5 defenses in the country. And the thing that I think really puts St. Mary's in a good position, they're a great rebounding team. They're the top rebounding margin in the country. So when you play a team like Alabama, that's just they're going to go. You've got to control the boards there. So that's a potential interesting one. I think the biggest thing with Duke that we need to monitor and we need to figure out is how long is their best defender, Malik Brown, going to be out with the shoulder injury. We know from what we've been told that Cooper Flagg is going to be fine by the time they start the NCAA tournament. Malik Brown is the guy for me that Duke cannot win a national title, I don't believe, without Malik Brown. And that's going to be the thing to watch there. Let's bounce over to the other side that pairs up with the East Regional, and it's the Midwest Regional that'll take place at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indy. The 3rd overall seed is the Houston Cougars. Kelvin Sampson's got another good team. We know the story with Houston is they get after your ass on defense. Houston might have the best offensive team that Kelvin Sampson has ever had there. They're on the top side. And then it gets a little interesting. And we talked about this. I talked about it earlier today on our social channels at Mike Arana Show. Follow us everywhere but Snapchat. We're not on Snapchat because we're not 12 and Snapchat sucks. Shout out Tony. He'll be back with us here pretty soon. But Gonzaga and Georgia right underneath Houston and SIU. But before we get into all of that, it's like a lane violation. I'm sorry, I committed the lane violation there. Mack, first thought when you look at the Midwest region that's paired with the East.
This is my fun bracket, man. There's a lot of cool things that are happening in this bracket. There are a lot of fun matchups. There are a lot of interesting teams. I put this is just a fun bracket to look at because I could honestly pick 2 or 3 teams that come out of this bracket.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent way to break down this bracket. The 2 seed, the Tennessee Volunteers, who lost to Florida today, but Zakai Ziegler, one of the best guards in the country, and we'll get matchup by matchup here. We've got Kentucky as a 3 seed, which is kind of an interesting team. Purdue, 4 seed, another team that I've talked about a couple of times this year, and they've got 3 really good players. I question their depth. Clemson, another team that a lot of people are high on. I've even seen in the hour and a half since the brackets have fully come out that Clemson is a team that some people are taking and saying, hey, this is a team I can see winning the whole thing. They get McNeese State. And you talked about the fun bracket. Amir Khan, the student manager for McNeese State. This dude just screams aura. He's a student manager that has an NIL deal. So we talk about NIL and the changing landscape of college athletics a lot. This is where it's cool. And to use your exact word, fun. You get a student freaking manager for Will Wade's team, and Will Wade is going to be back on the big stage. He's done a fantastic job at McNeese, and that's a really interesting matchup. But the fun bracket, Mac, is exactly how I would lay out the Midwest region.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at like High Point. That's another one that Purdue's going to have to deal with. They've won 14 straight games. I don't know who that is. So
We have a
go on.
Snapchat supporter out there.
I mean, that right off the bat. I mean, Purdue's going to have their hands full, I think, with High Point. I mean, that's a fun team. That's what I said. This is a fun bracket. And even Houston. I mean, that's a Gonzaga or Georgia. That's not an easy second round game. You don't want to get tangled up with Gonzaga or Georgia in your second round game. That part's not fun.
Well, and I think a lot of people, Mike White, I have my own personal feelings on Mike White from his tenure at Florida. I think Mike White was in a horrible position when he got the job at Florida. He's done a good job at Georgia. And the power talk of the SEC in their dominance this year and how many teams that they got into the tournament, the 14 teams. But I think one thing that people don't pay attention to with Georgia is we have to remember they beat Florida. They beat Kentucky. They beat St. John's. Like, Georgia can play. A lot of people think Gonzaga is hitting their role, and we know about their, until it comes to winning a national championship, we know about their place in March Madness here. And you saw it in the West Coast Conference Championship game against St. Mary's. It looks like Gonzaga might be kind of getting into their groove right here. So definitely compared to the last region we talked about in the East region, a little bit tougher road, I think, for Houston. There's one team, and I'm going to ask you first here. Is there one team in this Midwest region that really, really kind of jumps out to you as a team that can make some noise that maybe we're not talking about?
Yeah, I think UCLA. I think UCLA could be a team. I mean, they've been a little bit better. But the other team, and I said there's a couple of teams that I think could win this. The other team, we have to remember, the other team that was ranked number 1 during the year was Tennessee. And I like the way Tennessee plays. I like their guard play. I think they're a little kind of under the radar going into this tournament.
Yeah, and Illinois is another team that jumps out to me because Illinois was on a good run. A lot of freaking injuries. They're getting healthy now at the right time, and they get Morez Johnson back from a wrist injury. He missed 5 games in February, and that was right about the stretch where Illinois, we all started to go, what the hell is wrong with Illinois right now? They're going to get the winner of Texas and Xavier, which is a tough matchup, but I think Illinois is a team that can get out of the bottom side. I think I could foresee Illinois and Tennessee. Illinois is a team I think we shouldn't sleep on.
No, and it's funny because I put 3 question marks next to them because I just don't know what I'm going to get with them. And I put those question marks there because I think they're good enough to get through, but I still don't know what the product is right now with them. I'm still, again, a lot of question marks about Illinois.
Yeah, and you got Purdue in the High Point game we talked about. Obviously, my thing with Purdue is the depth. Kentucky's another interesting team. A lot of injuries that they dealt with as well. And Mark Pope's first year in Kentucky. And they're a team that could make a run. My problem with Kentucky, ironically, of all the people to make this comment, me making it is horribly ironic from back in both of our coaching days and TJ's as well. Kentucky is miserable on defense. And that's the thing that I think puts them not really, in a tough first round matchup. I wouldn't say that with Troy. Now, Troy, no shade. Conroy is a really good player for Troy, but I don't know if Kentucky can get much past the second round because they are absolutely miserable when it comes to playing defense.
Yeah, and I mean, and we've seen over the last couple of years, I mean, the teams that win a national championship, they all have that defensive aura about them. And so, that's why like a Houston is going to be there. There's another team that we'll talk about coming up down the road that plays some pretty good defense as well. There are actually a couple of them. They're offensively challenged, but, you get into a week where, you make a couple of baskets. I mean, that's all it takes. Because, defense is defense, and defense will win you. That's the thing about the tournament. You're going to win one game in the tournament on luck. It's one of those things. You always seem like you win one game, you get a bounce here and there. You're going to win another game because you play good defense. You're going to win one game because you shoot. It all depends upon those other two games is how far you're going to go. It depends on what happens in those other two games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Midwest region, when everybody has that snap reaction when the brackets first come out, and we're going to get to the West region here shortly, but I think by name, when everybody looked at the West region, I mean, the first thing I said when I saw the West region was, holy friggin' shit. Like, name-wise, the West region is loaded. The Midwest region, again, I think you nailed it, on the head. It's the fun region. Illinois, we just talked about them and their injuries and everything. They led the Big Ten in scoring. I mean, Wofford here, to follow your fun thing here. Wofford, who gets Tennessee in the first round. Kyler Filowich. If you haven't seen him yet, look him up on social media. If you haven't seen him, what the hell have you been doing? The granny free throw is like a lot of fun there. But when I break it down and I look at this Midwest region, I don't know what it is. And we've seen this from Houston before. And I think the fact that Kelvin Sampson has his best offensive team that he's ever had, at least in my opinion, and I think a lot of people kind of agree with that thought. LJ Cryer obviously at the head of this, but Milos Uzan was fantastic in the Big 12 tournament for Houston. And I think part of me leans, and we'll get to our Final Four picks and our national champions here in just a few minutes, but this is going to be a really interesting one. I think very compelling is the way to do it. Let's go south, shall we?
Let's go.
State Farm Arena in Atlanta will host the South Regional Final. The top overall seed in the NCAA tournament, no surprise to anybody, is Auburn. And they get the winner of Alabama State and St. Francis, the 2 seed, Michigan State. Here comes Sparty again and Tom Izzo. But I can't go any further than that because we're in the South Regional. Vegas Mack, what is the thing that comes to mind in the South Regional for you?
First thing that comes to mind, South Regional, Mike, is this is the strongest division. This is the strongest region whatsoever.
Metrically, it absolutely is. And we've got some interesting matchups here. The 8-9 matchup, Louisville and Creighton, the winner of that would obviously play Auburn, assuming Auburn can get past Alabama State and St. Francis, which I'm all for the stories. But, I banged the drum a few different times this year for Auburn and how I thought they were hands down the best team in the country. I don't know if I necessarily 100% believe that anymore, but there are some power players here in the South Regional. Michigan gets a UC San Diego team that if you have not watched the Tritons play this year, you have immensely missed out. This team can shoot. This team can get after you. And one of my favorite names of all the names in the NCAA tournament, my guy, Ty Magai for UCSD. The bottom side of this bracket is very, very interesting to me. Auburn, what's your take on Bruce Pearl's squad? Because I want to hear what you think, because I think there is one thing that determines how Auburn goes in this tournament. What's your take on Bruce Pearl's squad and their top half of the South Regional?
I mean, this is a rough team. I mean, they play rough. That's his brand. I worry about that being when they get into a tight game, how that's going to affect them. Is somebody going to blow a gasket on that team? And I mean, like I just said, you usually play one close game in the tournament. You blow a gasket in this, and that could be it. So that's my biggest thing for them. It's a solid squad. I don't know if they have one real go-to offensive player, that they have, but they're a rough, tough squad.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly where I was going. We know about Janai Broom, and it's going to be interesting to see who gets the National Player of the Year, whether it's Broom or whether it's Cooper Flagg. I think you can make a case for both of these guys. But the guy, to me, and it's interesting because, he is 25 years old. Chad Baker Mazzara is the guy that I think determines how far Auburn goes. He runs hot. He has a short fuse, and we've seen it at times. If he loses his shit, for lack of a better term, Chad Baker Mazzara is the needle mover for Auburn. John Broome gets all the attention there, but if Baker Mazzara can keep his head and Auburn continues to play the way they do, I think we're talking about Auburn being in San Antonio. And what happened to Auburn last year, you and your son tormented me while we were watching it last year. I think for this group, it is a hell of a learning curve, and I'm interested to see how that works. On the bottom side, Michigan State's an interesting team. We've got our first Final Four prediction there from Mr. Cherry Coke. Appreciate that. Appreciate you guys watching. Again, follow us on all of our social channels at Mike Arana Show. Feel free to comment. Let us know who got screwed. Who's your Final Four team? When I go down to the bottom half here, a really good Ole Miss team. You got San Diego State and North Carolina. That's going to be the talking point for the next 48 hours. Why the hell did North Carolina get in? Iowa State and Lipscomb, Marquette and New Mexico. If you want a game, you mentioned it. You said the BYU VCU game. Marquette and New Mexico is another one of those games you're going to want to make sure you're sick at the office or you have a meeting, because when Marquette and New Mexico are playing, you want to see that. Bryant is an interesting team. Phil Martelli Jr. at Bryant. For those of us old heads, as people like to say, like, that's an interesting one. Anything on the bottom half of the Midwest or the South regional that jumps out to you right away when you look at it?
I love just that bottom section. Those four teams: Marquette, New Mexico, Michigan State, and of course Bryant. It's an interesting mix because you have. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I haven't seen Bryant play this year. I'll throw that out. So those other three teams. Those are three really good defensive teams. And so that's just an interesting. I don't care how that kind of mixes in or mixes out. That's a really good thing. Iowa State is one of those things. You watch them one week and they look really, really good. To watch them the next, I'm not real sure. The week after that, there's no way. I mean, that's again. I'm not sure about Iowa State. I don't think they get through that. I think it's going to be somebody on the bottom half that gets through this part.
Yeah, and Iowa State. We've heard this just since the brackets have come out. Now they're going to be without Keyshawn Gilbert, and that's a massive loss for TJ Otzelberger's team without having him there. Tamin Lipsey is also a little dinged up, as we saw in the Big 12 tournament. I think initially when I looked at this by name and by body of work, if you will, this season, I liked where Iowa State was. That being said, I mean, I think the Keyshawn Gilbert injury is probably going to keep them from even getting to the second weekend, if you will. Marquette, and obviously, as a lot of people know that have followed us since our inception here, Marquette is a team that, and we, I tweeted this out on our X page the other day. I X'd it out. I don't know what the hell we're supposed to say anymore. I X'd it the other day.
You X'd it out.
Yeah, the frustrating thing with Marquette in the game against Xavier, they looked like dog shit in the first half. The second half, we saw what we thought Marquette could be capable of. But the matchup here, and TJ even texted this to us a little while ago as the brackets were coming out. He felt that Richard Pitino's New Mexico team got screwed as a 10 seed here. I don't think they did, because when you look at the overall breakdown of how they seeded everybody, New Mexico was the second 10 seed. When you look at the 9 seeds, you got Creighton, Georgia, Baylor, and Oklahoma in that order. Oklahoma's kind of a sticking point for people. I think New Mexico is right about where they should be. But Donovan Dent and Cam Jones, yeah, I want to watch that, and I want to watch that all night long. That is a tremendous matchup. And I think it's going to give Michigan State, a team that a lot of people think can win the national championship, I think that gives them in the second round a really tough game. But then there's Izzo. The calendar goes January, February, Izzo, to quote one of John Rothstein's sayings there. But it's Izzo time. It's March. I don't like that matchup for State in the second round, though.
No, I mean that's a tough one. Like I said, that part of the bracket is pretty tough. I want to throw it over to the other side because I'm looking at that. There's a couple of teams that I don't think are getting enough credit. Louisville is one of them, but the other one that I really like in this bracket, and I want you to think about this matchup. How about a Texas A&M Auburn matchup?
It's possible, but there's one problem. And you know this very well. The Ivy League champion Yale Bulldogs. And John Poulikitis, dude can shoot it. But I think people, and a lot of people don't get this about Yale because they're in the Ivy League. You don't see a lot of Ivy League games. Yale is physical. They like to beat the crap out of you. So it's an interesting spot, a very compelling matchup for Texas A&M with Yale. Can Yale replicate last year? Michigan is a talking point. And they get, again, the UC San Diego team that I mentioned. I'm a sicko. Like, if there's a game on at 9 o'clock on ESPN Plus, and ESPN Plus is actually friggin' working for a change and not asking you to log in 14 times. But UC San Diego, man, and it's not because it's a 12-5. And again, we're going to get to the seeding numbers here in a little bit, and I can't wait to hear Charles Barkley say this, but they've got some names on this team that are interesting. My guy, Ty McGuy, Tate Jones. This team can fill it up, man. And for a team that is on a 15-game winning streak, which was tied for the nation's longest after they beat UC Irvine in the Big West title game, which the Big West title game last night was fun. UC Irvine played great. So did UC San Diego. 30-4 are the Tritons. And yeah, you're going to go, well, they play in the Big West. They haven't played anybody. I think the South Regional, Mac, as we finish up the South Regional, and I'm going to ask you for your final thought, obviously. I think the South Regional is the one that can be the kettle bubbling and we could see some absolute freaking chaos. When it's all said and done, I still think Auburn is the cream of the crop. I think we're going to see some upsets from the bottom. Final thought on the South region from you.
I think this is going to go a lot like how I think this whole tournament's going to go. I think early on, I'm not even going to call games upsets because I think you have a lot of teams that are a lot closer than people think. I think the first couple rounds are going to be very interesting. I think once we get out of the first two rounds, I think things are going to stabilize. But especially in this region, you could take a coin and flip just about any one of these games. I mean, honestly, I can say I can think North Carolina could probably beat San Diego State. North Carolina could probably beat Ole Miss. I mean, and they could move on. I mean, it's that kind of a bracket. It's a hard bracket. I mean, if you told me Iowa State came out of this, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, maybe a little. And I don't think a lot of people would be. And, I'm a sicko. I'm a little disappointed that North Carolina was not put in a matchup right by Arizona, because it would have been great to see, does RJ Davis end Caleb Love's career, or does Caleb Love end RJ Davis's career? I think that would have been a fascinating sub-story. And as we know, in March, we get all kinds of them. Let's go out west. To the West Regional, by name, I think looks like the toughest region. The South Regional, by metrics and seeds, is actually the tough region. But by name, we have a murderer's row of names in this region. But I can't go any further in this region because I want to know, first thing that jumps off of your head about the West region. Oh, that was ironic timing.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I mean, titles. Yeah, that's what I put. I put titles. This, Just titles, baby, titles. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, the fourth number one seed, the Florida Gators, who it's interesting, and I know you're going to have some questions for me here after we finish up our thoughts on the West Regional, but the Florida Gators, the number one overall seed, the SEC tournament champions, the number two seed, the Big East tournament champions, the Big East regular season champions, St. John's, your 3 seed, Texas Tech, your 4 seed, Maryland, with the Crab 5, the highest scoring starting 5 in the country. And I could go farther than that, but I just gave you the top 4 seeds in the West region. Then we can go a little bit farther, Mac, and we can add the rest of the names that we were referring to. UConn, Kansas, Arkansas, also all in the region. Memphis, Penny Hardaway's got a team that if they're on like they were today, they're really, really good. This West region, I think, has the potential to give us the greatest games. The West Regional Final will be played in San Francisco at the Chase Center, the home of the Warriors. Let's look at the top side first, Mac. Your thoughts on the top side of the West region?
It's kind of funny. So when I go through all the brackets, what I do is I put circles around like games that I just want to see. I got more circles in this region than any other region. I kind of been on Florida all year. You were kind of sour on Florida, especially at the beginning of the year. I kind of like them right off the bat. Maybe you want to speak to that first. We know you're a big Gators fan, but I like this team from the start.
I think it was twofold when you brought it up the first time. Obviously, the great heyday of the Gators, and I was fortunate at the time as a young coach to get to go out and meet Billy Donovan. And on that staff, there was Matt McCall and Larry Chiat, and there was so many coaches there. And that was in the height of the Gator boys with Humphrey and Green and Noah and Horford. And, that was a good time to be a Gator fan because football was great and basketball. I'm getting choked up here. Nostalgia. Basketball was great. Here's my thing, and I'll say this, and I know I've said it to you guys, but part of it's like the fan part of it. I don't want to get my hopes up for, to be crashed down. The other part of it, and this is my thing with Florida, and we're going to talk obviously a little bit more about Florida in depth here in a second, but I have some concerns about tight games and coaching adjustments. And you and I can both speak to this, as can TJ, because of our coaching experience. Obviously not at the NCAA Division I level, but we got a lot of basketball hours under all of us from a coaching standpoint. There's been times when they've been in close games this year that, and I say this having watched Todd Golden when he was at the University of San Francisco. So I wonder when they get into late game situations, if he can make the adjustments to put them over the top. Because if you look at this team, talent-wise, top to bottom, they have the best guard trio in the country. Their bigs attack, and they play at a chaotic pace. And that's probably not even the right word for it. There's a word better than chaotic. I have questions about some late game situations when they get into some tight ones. Do I think they can get out of the top side of this bracket? I honestly think that they're not going to get a push from anybody on the top side of this bracket. Now, I know that might have some thoughts from you because there could be a show battle in the second round of this bracket, but I really don't see anybody on the top side of this bracket that can match up body for body, depth to depth with them. I don't think anybody in the country can match up depth for depth with the Gators.
No, I don't disagree with you, and I don't even know if that matchup will even happen. We'll have to wait and see, obviously.
No, that's questionable.
But this whole top half is fun. I mean, people, again, another team that people don't see a lot of that's not only a good offensive team but a good defensive team is Colorado State, and they've been really, really, really good since about mid-December. And they're going to take on a Memphis team. But this is about GCU. and what they can do, and that's a fun matchup with Maryland, and there. So this whole top half, again, I got circles on every single game because I think every single game is a definite must see. But I agree with you. I would like to see them. I would like to see Maryland and Florida. I think that's a matchup I would like to see. I haven't seen. I've seen bits and pieces of Maryland this year. I would like to see. I think that would be a good test for Florida as they make their way through this.
Yeah, in Maryland, I mean, another team, and you brought them up a couple weeks ago. I think it was in your 60 on Saturday's Mack's Wild Ride, where he goes around the entire sports world. Again, you can see that on all of our social channels, as I learned how to speak English again. Something that Mack puts out every Saturday, where he just gets to unload the memory bank on what's going on in sports. And you talked about this Maryland team, kind of underrated, and we know the big thing with Maryland is the Crab Five, as they like to call them. And I think this is a team that if somebody knocks Florida off before the Final Four, it's them. Freshman Derek Queen. He's probably going to be a lottery pick. 15.7 points per game, 9.2 rebounds a game. He's kind of I don't want to call him an old school player, but he's got a lot of old school tendencies to him. But my worry with Maryland is, outside of that fantastic Crab Five that they have, is do they have the depth? And I think that, again, is the thing that makes Florida so entirely dangerous, is how deep they are. And that's the big thing in that spot. Let's look at the bottom side, because there's some interesting matchups here.
Baby.
Yeah, the 2 seed St. John's, obviously everybody's high on them. We had a couple of interesting worded direct messages today. Listen, I think the St. John's thing is great. I think Rick Pitino was a shoo-in to go to St. John's and rebuild St. John's, and he's done that. We know the Pitino factor. The year before, the first year, the second year. St. John's best offense is an offensive rebound, and that's going to get them so far. And I think that gets them to the second weekend. Texas Tech could be a fly in the ointment for St. John's. I just don't think the Johnnies have the offense to carry them all the way through. Now, some people will say, well, your best offense is a great defense sometimes. That's entirely true. We saw literally what they did to Marquette the other night. Marquette was beating them at halftime, and they put the vice grips on Marquette in the second half. Bottom side of the bracket, let's go. I know you like the bottom side. I think this might be your favorite, like, little sub-region of all of the regions.
Yeah, I mean, let's start right off the bat. Let's go Kansas and Arkansas. Kansas has been, I mean, all year long they've been maligned. They just have not got it done. They've the fact that they're a 7 seed, I think, is a little high for them. Quite honest, I don't think they're that good. But
Kansas,
we all know what's that?
You said Kansas there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we all know if there's a second round matchup that we want to see. Right? Be honest. We all do. We want to see Arkansas. I mean, either way, it's kind of cool. Either way, we're going to, I mean, if St. John's wins, and either one of those.
For me, it's not cool. I want to see Arkansas and St. John's.
Yeah.
Bill
because we all
interesting. I know where you're going there.
Yeah, but Pitino and and Calipari. I mean, how can you not want to see? I mean, I would actually pay to go see that game. That would be fun. And I don't even want to watch the game. I just want to watch those two guys coach against each other.
Yeah, just give us a camera on the two of them. Yeah,
like seriously, that would be so much. So,
yeah, I agree with you, and I think that was the first thing that jumped out to a lot of people there was that potential for that second round matchup. And Arkansas is going to get Boogie Flan back, and that gives them some depth that they've really struggled with. But I said it in the SEC tournament when they opened the SEC tournament. My thing with Arkansas is Arkansas does not play very smart basketball.
No.
I the free throw at the end of the game in their first round matchup, like they were trying to miss it, and Calipari said he goes, "I do some unconventional stuff sometimes." It wasn't the word he used, but
No.
it's like, dude, you're up 3, make the free throw, you're up 4. They can't tie you on a bomb. You miss the free throw, and they take a heave in the month of March, and anything can happen. So, it's one of those things that I think the way Arkansas plays basketball definitely doesn't get them out of the second round. I think the coaching matchup there, the Calipari and Patino, yeah, give me Dan Hurley on the commentary of those two guys mic'd up, and I'm great. And that's the thing, is you've got Dan Hurley in this region, who everybody loves to hate. You've got Cal, you've got Bill Self, you got St. John's and Rick Pitino. Colorado State, let's go back up to the top side here. 10-game winning streak. Nick Clifford, if you haven't watched him play this year, is a guy that you really need to see play. And the status of Tyrese Hunter for Memphis. And I honestly, when I look at this is going to sound insanely crazy. It's fine. I could see Colorado State and Florida playing each other here, because the top set, let's have the UConn conversation with the guy that should have the UConn conversation. UConn leads the country in blocks. Liam McNeely, when he's on, makes UConn a dangerous team. This UConn team, the difference of this UConn team compared to the past UConn teams, and I'm gonna say this and let you go. This UConn team does not defend anywhere near the way the last couple of years UConn teams does. I know they've lost some people, but they just don't have the stones from what we've seen defensively. They don't have that get after your ass defensive mentality this year.
No, they don't defend. They struggle with the ball. They are a turnover factory, and more turnovers than Arby's. And sorry.
No, I can hear TJ somewhere going, more turnovers than Sarah Lee in the background. Go ahead.
And they just, the last couple of years, the one thing about UConn that has set them apart from their defense is that if somebody had a bad night, somebody could pick up the slack, and they don't have that this year. They don't have that one guy that can really go, besides McNeely a little bit, but I mean they don't have that depth where if one guy's having a bad night, they can go, they don't go inside or whatnot. I mean, it's just not the same team, and that's fine. If they get by Oklahoma, they're not going to beat Florida. Let's just be honest with that. I mean, that's not what's going to happen. But your point about Colorado State, I can definitely see Colorado State getting through the first weekend. Again, they're a very balanced team. They're very good offensively. They're in the top half, both offensively and defensively, in the country. So, again, keep an eye on Colorado State.
Yeah, and Grand Canyon, obviously, Drew has them on the up and up. This is a team that has experience. They knocked off St. Mary's last year. I remember that night great because it was a great night in the how big is my unit category. But, I think that's a tough matchup for Maryland there. I just think the starting 5 for Maryland's depth gets them there. Texas Tech, I also very much see them. It's not often, and we don't see this often, and obviously we're going to get to our Final Four picks and our national championship picks here in just a second. I know you've got a couple of questions that you want to ask me about as far as what we're doing from a betting standpoint initially, but I think Maryland's going to get pushed there. I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado State won. As I just said, I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado State went and played Florida for a chance to get to the Elite Eight. The bottom side, I think there's a lot more questions at the bottom side, but I think this is a rare opportunity and I hope, because I think the matchup would be ridiculously good. that we get the 1 versus the 2 in the West Regional here, because we want to talk about, to steal from AJ Styles for a second, you want to talk about a Styles clash? Florida and St. John's is the ultimate Styles clash there. Again, follow us on all of our social channels at Mike Arana Show, everywhere but Snapchat, because Snapchat sucks and we're not 12. TJ needs to come back. I'm tired of saying that. We're going to continue our March Madness, our spring training tours tomorrow night, St. Patrick's Day, with the San Francisco Giants. More of that later this week. All right. Shall we?
We shall, Mike. I know one of the things. I mean, there's not too many people that I know that watch more college basketball than you. Maybe my son might be the only other person that I think.
Your son who won our tournament challenge last year, and just let him know that I'm taking him down this year.
All right. Well, I'll let him know. He's fired up and ready to go. Trust me.
That's from Uncle Mike. He's going down this year.
Although he was not real happy with the Michigan State placement, but we'll get to that later.
Of course, it's not.
Yeah. So tell me, you always have your finger on the pulse of college basketball. So give me, say I'm new to this. Give me a couple of teams under the radar that you think could have a successful week or two.
So you want teams I've bet on to win the national championship is what you're asking in a weird way.
Yeah, where you know? Yeah, I was trying to be nice. Your fingers on the pulse.
So there's a third team that I'm kind of eyeballing here, and I'm wrestling in my head because I said it earlier today on our social channels. I just said it a second ago. St. John's. They don't have the offense, I think, to win a national title. That being said, if there's a team that can defensively win a national title, it's St. John's. And obviously we've got, and these are all changing, but at the bottom of the screen there, we've got the most up-to-date when we went live here, national championship odds, and those are according to DraftKings. So you might see some numbers there. And literally as St. John's is rolling across right now. At 22-1, I think the Johnnies have some good value. I also think that we've got a potential here that Houston could win it. You're not going to get great value this late on Houston. So who do I actually want to, as far as my betting goes, win the national championship? I took a bet on Wisconsin, and I did this going into the Big Ten tournament because I think John Tonje is one of the most underrated players in all of college basketball. I think there's a lot of people that haven't seen them play. And Wisconsin has a style of play that if they're on shooting, they're really good. And today against Michigan, you saw Wisconsin kind of with the brunt, if you will, of 4 games in 4 days. And Tonje was the one that you saw it the most with. You saw some tired legs there, which can often happen in conference tournaments. That being said, Wisconsin didn't play their A game today, and that game went down to the wire. Mm-hmm. I really hate that I'm going to say this because I'm concerned for a couple of reasons, but I grabbed Florida when they were 17-1 about a month and a half ago. When I started to see the bulk of their depth in full form. And I think the thing that separates Florida, and if you were watching the SEC tournament the other day, their depth can wear people out. And between Richard and Clayton and Hauk and Condon, I mean, and Martin, I mean, we can just keep going and going and going. Martin's got Final Four experience. Like, this team they're freaking loaded. And I don't know if there's a team that has better depth than this Florida Gators team. The fan in me says,
right.
I don't want to jinx it, but
right.
When you just look at the raw hard numbers, I don't think there's a team playing better basketball in the country than Florida is. So let's go. Which way do you want to do this? Let's pull our final 4 picks as we wrap this thing up here.
All right. So I'm always unconventional in this whole process.
That's a word.
Yeah, very unconventional. And so I always feel like there's going to be one half of the bracket that's going to stay pretty true, and then I always feel like there's one that there's going to be all kinds of weird stuff. And so, in looking at this, this is my final four. You ready?
Hell yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for Thursday. What are you talking about?
I know. This is where there's no surprises. I got Duke and Houston.
Okay.
Okay. My other half of the bracket, that's where it gets a little funky. I got St. John's and A&M.
You know, I could see it. I could see it.
And then that would make for a national championship game of Duke versus St. John's. And I'm not going to tell you.
That would be a hell of a no. Don't tell me, because I need to put out my final four first. You can give me your national champion here, and feel free to comment with your final four picks, as Mr. Cherry Coke did earlier. He's got Auburn, Florida, Arizona, and Kentucky. So when I look at this, and we just talked about it in on the left side of the bracket, I'll start there. I have believed in this Auburn team. I believed in them last year. I think what happened to them last year is a great indicator of possible success this year. I would love to see them play UC San Diego in the Sweet 16. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I got Auburn. I've got Florida. I've got Wisconsin.
Ooh.
And I have Clemson. And I think your national championship game would be Florida and Wisconsin. So, since you just made me go, your national title here. Who wins the title?
Well, I'll tell you, if it gets down to St. John's and Duke, I think there's no doubt in my mind that Duke would win. But Ben, I'd be in the Johnny's corner.
You imagine how crazy New York would be if the Johnnies win the Natty? Rick Pitino, greatest coach of all time?
You know?
That's an interesting debate right now, too, going around. Is Rick Pitino, with what he's done, a top 3 coach of all time? And we're not going to do that here because we don't have enough time, because we got brackets to fill out. That was my question. Have you filled out? I know we had a short window here before we went on the air. Have you filled out a bracket entirely yet?
No.
Okay.
How
many do you typically do?
I don't do too many. A handful. You know. This year it'll be.
I've already filled out one.
See, it's easier for me this year. Like the last couple of years, it hasn't been fun because I really thought UConn could win, and so you get jaded. You know, like. I mean, You'll have that struggle this year because of Florida. You know, you want to put your knowledge and say, okay, the last couple of years, UConn was the best team, and they should be my champion. But, as a fan, you always have that little bit of pushback in your mind. This year, it's a whole lot easier because UConn's not going to win a national championship this year. So I can kind of look at this a little freer and feel a little bit better about it. No personal pressure, I guess I should say.
I have already filled out one. I will fill out 2 more, and that is all I do. I don't go past 3.
So. Yeah, and then plus our house. I mean, the only other team. Well, there's 2. The only other team. We got a little bit. We have Michigan State and U of A. So there's a little bit of that there. So there's not too much. So
now, before you actually give me your national championship pick, I know on good sources. Mainly your wife, that your aforementioned son wants to turn the living room wall into a bracket. Now, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm gonna leave that.
And Mama's watching, so I mean that could have something to determine your answer here. But
I'm gonna let her deal with that. I'll let her deal with that. There's certain things that are probably off limits for me, and that's probably one.
I think that's a wise choice. Now make your national championship pick. Again, remind everybody of what your title game was.
So I had St. John's and Duke. Like I said, if it came down to those two, I think Duke wins. So Duke would win another national championship.
Duke is Duke. They're on more than reruns of Leave It to Beaver. Florida and Wisconsin. I could see either one of them winning. If Florida and Wisconsin play in the title game,
you're going to be a happy person.
I'm going to be a stupid happy person because we're talking money, 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 baby. I just like from last year what this Florida team did when they got in and Hanlockton's injury, catastrophic injury that we all remember. The mama says she already told him he could turn the living room into a bracket. So we will post that picture on our social channels. I'm concerned about the late game situations. This team is so damn deep. They arguably, and this might not be a popular thing in Gainesville because all of us Gator fans remember the Gator boys and the back-to-backs. And I am one of the believers that if they all would have came back for the last year, they probably would have won a third national title. I think that this Gator team could be better than both of those teams because of their depth. As much as I don't want to do it, and this is probably the jinx, nobody in Gainesville hate me for this. I think Florida wins the national title. I think they're on that rise right now between Clayton and Richard and the rest of their depth. I could sit here and go guy by guy. I mean, hell, 7'9" freshman who doesn't even play cuts down the nets today without using a ladder. I mean, that's how deep this Florida team is. I would love to see Walter Clayton and John Tanjay in San Antonio for a national title. I think it'd be fantastic. But I'm taking the Gators to win the whole thing. Whether I just jinxed them or not, I don't know. But that's my national title pick.
No, and I think that's good. I mean, I think without a doubt, they've been one of the best teams all year. And when you, like you said, when you get into the tournament, I'm a firm believer you're going to have one of those rough games. It always happens. And a team that has depth like Florida, you can withstand a couple of guys in foul trouble. It's just the way that it is. It happens. It's just the way that teams win. That's the formula. You got to get through. You got to get through one rough game.
Now I'm going to have a nervous pit in my stomach for like the next 2 weeks. But in all seriousness, and I think the separating factor is for Florida. I mean, we talked about Martin. We talk about Clayton, we talk about Richard. It's the separating thing outside of the depth for the Gators is how their bigs attack, and they attack downhill. And you and I both know this from our coaching days, as does TJ. When you have bigs that can attack downhill and they are comfortable playing in chaos, that is a dangerous, dangerous mix. So lots of stuff going on. Again, tomorrow we'll be back with our spring training tours, the San Francisco Giants. We've got the Royals and Cardinals on Tuesday. Then we've got the Yankees and Mets on Wednesday. The madness will be coming. We'll make sure that we set you up for each day. And I've been working on a poem for Thursday morning since you said that you suck at poetry the other night. But follow us on all of our social channels. At Mike Arana Show. There are a lot of people behind the scenes that we want to thank for trying to make the three of us ugly MFers look good, and they do a hell of a job with that. For TJ, who will be back with us soon, for my co-pilot Vegas Mack, I'm Mike. Happy bracketing, and we will talk to you tomorrow with our spring training tours. We are out.